And here we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to LisaBug Yoga for Functional Posture. We have been taking a deep dive into how to keep our body in postural alignment as best as we can. And we've tackled that from different areas. We've tackled tight hip flexors. We've tackled a weak mid and upper back. And this week we're going to work on cervical placement. So we can take our head and we can put it in a lot of different positions. Some are great for your posture, some are not so great. And over the years, because of what we do functionally in our day, and a lot of it is spent being kind of in this position over our devices, we get something called forward head position. And usually our shoulders round forward and our neck protrudes out this direction. So I was kind of playing with this on Tuesday a little bit as we were working with things and placing the neck. And I found that if I took my hand and I put it, let me put it in front of my black shirt so you can see it. If I put it in a little bit of an L with my thumb out and my finger up, and I put the finger on the underneath of the tip of my chin, my thumb touches the upper sternum. And if we're in the forward head position, what happens now is my finger is kind of underneath my chin back by my throat. And I have to pull it back and kind of draw the chin backward a little bit, but I don't want to do it too much because then my finger is in front of my chin. So I want it right underneath the tip of the chin. And then if I do exercises such as bend forward, I don't want to come up with my head or down with my head and lose that cervical position. Same thing if I turn my head from side to side. Of course, I'm coming away from the tip of my finger, but it's staying right along that same plane of movement. Same thing if I tip my head from side to side. My finger is still right there. So you may from time to time in a pose today, maybe we're in warrior two, you might just take your hand and go, am I still in that position, or have I come out of alignment with that? Especially when we come down onto the floor, both on our stomach and on our back, we want to keep that position. If you have a rounded upper back a little bit and your head is tipped forward, when you lay on your back, your head's not going to touch the floor without your head falling way back. So if that's you, I want you to make sure you have a little bit of head support for any of the poses that we do laying on our back. So I would like for you to pick up a yoga block. If you don't have one, maybe just take a hand towel, something like that, and fold it up a few times so that you have something of substance. You can put your hands together, but I want to have some separation in your hands. So I'm going to take my little bit thinner yoga block. And then what we're going to do is press it between the palms of our hands. I'm standing with my feet a little wider than hips distance apart. And my block is forward. So I'm not flipped up here. I have it, my fingertips directly out. And then notice the angle that my elbows are at. So this would be incorrect. This would be incorrect. They're at a little bit of a diagonal angle. And if I press into the block, I can feel the muscles of my chest just start to switch on. And then just glide your chin forward towards me and then pull it back. It's kind of like a little turtle coming out of its shell and then retracting back into the shell. And I want you to see how much mobility you have to glide your neck in and out this way. It's kind of a little bit of a different movement. And one more time, glide it forward and then draw it back, but try not to really pull back. You're in that thumb to tip of the finger position. And then I'd like for you to keep the block right in front of your chest as we turn our entire body to the right. So in other words, when you turn, I don't want the block to go over here. I want you to keep it right at the sternum. In fact, you can touch it to your chest and then rotate. And then back to center and rotate to the other side. Now, I don't want your pelvis to move. So when you rotate, you're only going as far as you can without letting your hips start to rotate, or your feet. So both of these frontal hip bones are pointing straight ahead. And you'll start to feel some oppositional stretching across the hip flexor that you're going away from. And pressing in on the block or whatever you're using, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, you're pressing at about a 4. Just enough to keep the muscles engaged. And retract your shoulder blades down and back as you do this. Let's go one more each side. I'm actually feeling a fair amount of work with this pressure into the block. And back to the center line. Just pause to relax that energy for a moment. If you start to feel any strain in your neck anytime you're doing poses, take a break, don't work through it, and kind of move your head around a little bit. Just loosen that up if you're feeling those muscles are tightening too much. Okay, press back into the block. Shoulders are down and away from the ears, and we are going to tip the body to one side and pull it up and to the other side. Now we do this side bending a lot, but typically we're reaching an arm above the head, and that feels great. But for today, what I'm wanting you to focus on is scapular stability and this neck position, cervical placement. Over time, as we age, we develop postural misalignments, and usually those come from functional activities that might change our posture because we're sitting so much during the day or slumped, but it also can come from muscular imbalance. So maybe we typically work one side of our body harder than the other, or we have changes in our spine like scoliosis and kyphosis. Kyphosis is the hunched back. We can also develop lordosis, which is a really severe sway back. So based on your postural changes and misalignments, we want to strengthen both sides of the body equally, the front, the back, the right, the left, the top, the bottom, opposing muscle groups. Okay, let's come back up and relax that for just a moment. Maybe roll the shoulders out. So I'm going to turn sideways now, or on a little bit of an angle, as we're back into that position with the block. Bend your knees a little bit. Keep this cervical placement just right in place and start to do a little hinge forward from your hips, but try not to let your head come forward or down or out of that position. And you might just set your block down for a second and just put your finger right underneath your chin and do this, coming up and coming down and not losing that cervical placement. It's okay to come in here and do this feedback, but then eventually I want you to have that in your muscle memory and to just know, oh, am I dropping my head when I'm doing this? Or am I looking at the computer screen when I'm doing this? So keeping that cervical placement right in place. And we want our knees to bend so that we're not stressing our lower back to do this. It's a partial forward fold. And we do this a lot during the day to reach down, pick something up off the floor, whatever it might be functionally in life. We've got to keep our posture good when we're hinging forward. We've got to keep our knees bent when we're picking something up so we don't stress the lower back. One more. Still pressing in on that block. And come up. Now I want you to see if this feels okay to tip forward, kind of a medium amount here, and hold. And then we are going to rotate to one side and then to the other, still pressing in on the block, still keeping that scapular engagement, still keeping our chin and cervical placement in that little L-shaped position. Scoop your abs in and up. And again, your knees are softly bent. Let's do one more of these each direction. We're going pretty slow and controlled. What does this look like? Kind of like maybe a golf swing, something like that. Back to center and rise up. Great. All right, we can set that block down to the floor. Now I want to focus on this position while we come into standing extension. So oftentimes you'll see someone reach up and then their head goes way back. Well, then I definitely don't have that cervical placement. So I want you to keep that in position and then just inhale up. And when you extend back a little bit, just push your hips forward, lift your heart. Your head's going to move, but only because your upper chest came back a little bit. We're not going to drop the head way back. And then lower the arms down. So this is our swan dive. Usually it begins a sun salutation practice. And you don't have to do this with your arms. If that bothers your shoulders, you can just keep your hands right in front of you and come into your little baby back bend spinal extension and back up to neutral. And we are going to be doing this later in class today in our cobra pose on our belly. So we're going to be practicing being able to lift the chest up off the floor without lifting the chin forward and the head back. And there is such a tendency to do that because our body feels like we're coming up more if we lift our head back. But it's not about what your head's doing. It's about what your spine is doing from the thoracic down to the lumbar. Okay, so I want to bring this extension and then into your forward fold. You can do whatever you want with your arms, but we'll inhale, come into that little small back bend, but not throwing the head back. Exhale, soften the knees, and keep your head neutral as you come down. Hands can come to a chair, shins to your block, all the way to the floor. And we're just going to flow through this. So knees bend a little bit. We come up. We take a little baby back bend without throwing the head back. And we exhale, coming into our forward fold at any amount. And our spine is staying completely neutral from the tailbone, through the shoulder blades, through the back of the head. So the only joints that are really moving is, of course, our shoulder joints if we're lifting our arms up and coming down. But it is at the hip, flexion and extension of the hip. And then, of course, we're bending our knees a little bit, so we're moving through the knee joint a little bit. Not much at the ankle. That should stay pretty stable. And then really firm up your abdominals. Let's just do one more. And come up. Now we'll sit into chair pose, keeping this position of the neck in place. As we sit our heels back, our hips back toward our heels, my upper body's on an angle, but my head's not looking forward or it's not dropping down to the floor. And you might want to do a couple of these just with your fingertip underneath your chin, and your thumb on the sternum as you come up and down in and out of chair pose, just to see, am I keeping it rock solid in place? And then if you feel like you've got it, then you can add anything with your arms. Maybe hands can come to prayer, namaste, Anjali Mudra. Maybe the arms come forward. If the arms come forward, keep your shoulder blades retracted back. You can even do that press into the block with the wrists toward your body and the fingers away from you rather than straight up. And you decide how low you want to go in this chair pose. Feeling the strength of your legs, scoop your abs in. You're feeling your foot, all four corners of the foot anchored into the floor, but there's a little bit more of your weight back into your heels. One more time. Then hold that chair pose. Glance down. Try to glance down without dropping your head. Just kind of look at your knees with your eyes and make sure they are parallel straight forward. And we will turn our chair to the right and left. And I want the hands to stay right in front of the chest. Or if you're using that block, the block stays in front of your chest. It doesn't come over to the side as you twist. Just rotating side to side. And your head can turn with you, or you can keep your gaze in place and just turn the mid back, upper back to the side and keep the chin right in that L-shaped position as you move from side to side. If you're using the block, press in. Activate the lats right underneath the armpits. Retract the shoulders back into that scapular retraction. Brace the abdominals, a transverse. Those abdominals that are deep, the deepest layer that wrap around your torso. Let's do one more of these twists each side. And make sure your knees aren't moving side to side or your pelvis. This is just in your spine. And then come to center and rise up out of that chair pose. If you're using the block, you can set it down. Come to a nice mountain pose. Okay, we are going to be down on our bellies. If you need anything for maybe knee padding, anything like that, you can have that for you. So we'll take that inhale. Keep your chin in neutral as you do a little baby back bend. Exhale, head in neutral as you fold into your forward bend. And then we'll reach the hands down to the floor. Walk your feet back behind you and come down to your belly. All right. So let's come just with the arms right by the sides of our body. My elbows and forearms and palms are on the floor. And just keep that L position of your head in place right now. So you shouldn't be looking up. And if you feel like you need to look at the screen, just do it for a second and then come back into place, because you can hear my voice and just base it on your auditory cues. So I want you to think about what your feet are doing. If you can, push the tops of your feet down into the floor. Oh, that feels interesting. That's going to connect with the front of your thighs. Your kneecaps might even lift off the floor just a little bit. So we're pressing down with the feet. Now take your hands off the mat, and without changing the position of your head, try to lift your chest up, up, up off the floor a little bit. And again, we're not jutting the chin forward. Keep it pulled in, and then come down. Did you lose the connection with the legs? So think about it again. Push your feet down into the floor. Lift up and down. And again, two more. Lift up. And we're not using the strength of our arms at all, so this could likely be very small. One more. Lift up and come down. Now I want you to be really careful, but use your arms to push yourself up. See what that feels like. I'm really not using my back now. I'm just using my arms. So I'm pressing into the floor, pushing myself up. And your arms are a little wider than your shoulders. Your elbows are pointing back toward your feet, not out to the side. Up. Check your head position. Just one more using your hands. Up. And down. At any time you need to rest, you can just fold your hands right underneath the forehead and relax right here. So now I want you to use your hands about 25% and your back about 75. So this is all just up to how you think that feels. It's very subjective. So about 25% with your hands, 75% with your back. And come down. So your arms are just giving yourself a little bit of assistance so that you can come up a little further if it feels okay for you. And down. Reactivate your legs, pushing the top of your feet into the floor. 2 more. Lift and lower. 1 more. Up and down. Now let's see if you can comfortably find a Sphinx pose. So you're going to slide your hands forward a little bit till you come up on your forearms. And then you're using the forearms just to hold yourself up. But I also want you to tighten your abs. So try not to just let your back sway. Check your head position. You might even be able to take your fingers here right now off the floor and do your chin to thumb. And then we are going to turn the head without looking up, without dropping down, just keeping it along that plane. A word we can use is axis. So your head's rotating on its axis without tipping. Forward or back, down or up, side or side. Just rotating on the axis. Now, if this isn't feeling good for you in Sphinx, you can slide your hands back any amount to lower your back down. More in a little small baby cobra, and you can still do this head turn from side to side. This is giving us some strengthening for the back of the neck muscles. And I just forgot about my legs. So reactivate, push your feet into the mat. Let's go 1 more each side. And come back to center. And then slide your hands back a little more so you can push yourself up to your hands and knees. Really engage your core. Be careful of your shoulders. Bring yourself up. So push yourself all the way back so you come into a nice child's pose. Your head may or may not find the mat. And we are just going to slowly move from child's pose to a kneeling plank. So when we come forward to kneeling plank, the hips drop down so the body's in a nice straight line. And if you need to check the screen, look at it quick and then bring your head back to that L-shaped position. So it's not up, it's not drooping down. Find that perfect cervical placement. And then push back and come forward. Now you might need to make any modifications for wrists. I haven't really done this from my forearms, but I'm going to try that. I think it's possible. So from your elbows, it's harder from the elbows because I can't get my hips to drop down as well. There we go. So maybe that's an option from the elbows. And it's mostly about the head. So if you don't get all the hips all the way down to kneeling plank, just go as far as you feel you can, keeping your cervical placement. One more time, child's pose. To your kneeling plank. And come back to your child's pose. If it feels comfortable for you, bring your hands next to the sides of your body. This is your traditional child's pose, Balasana, and let your shoulders relax. If your forehead doesn't reach the mat, a block or a blanket is really nice to place underneath your head. And your cervical placement might not be actually perfect here. This is just more of a relaxation pose, not a working pose. One more breath. All right, let's come up to all fours. Hands and knees. You can also do this standing up, hands and feet with your hands on a chair. And we'll come into spinal balance by taking the right leg straight back, flexing your foot, point your toes down, and keep your pelvis level. So try not to let your pelvis rotate up. With your left hand, check your cervical placement. So put your thumb underneath the tip of your chin, and then send that left arm long. Now you can just hold this, work on the cervical placement, or we can bring the knee in and back. We can bring the arm in and back, or in and forward. Or we can bring both the knee and the arm, but I don't want you to do cat and cow. I want you to keep neutral spine, neutral cervical placement. You might need to come down on your right elbow, forearm. 2 more. One more. And that hand and knee, find the mat. Press back to child's pose and relax the wrist on that right side. You might need to do some wrist circles, little stretches there. All right, if you are ready, we'll repeat to the other side. So you're coming up, hands and knees. Your left leg goes straight back. Flex your foot. Slightly drop that left hip down, so this is all level across your pelvis. Really straighten that left leg. Then take your right hand off the floor and do your L, your cervical placement. Just check it. And then reach the right arm straight out. You can stay here and just anchor and breathe. We can bring the left knee in and out. We can bring the right elbow in and out, or both of them at the same time. Good. Really lengthening the back of the neck, the front of the neck, the right side of the neck, the left side of the neck. That's your last one. And then come back down to the mat. Let's take one more child's pose. You can bring the arms back here again, or if you like the extended child's pose to stretch the lats, you can reach the fingertips out nice and long. Now we're going to come into a downward dog, and if you prefer to use your chair, that would be fantastic. So we can either tuck the toes right here, lift the hips up, push back off of the hands and try to settle your heels down toward the floor. Or you can walk forward and bring your hands right to the chair and get your down dog from here. So I want you to internally notice your cervical placement. If you have the balance and stability to take your hand off the floor, you can check it with that L position with your hand. Otherwise, really notice whether you're dropping your head. I see that a lot in yoga classes. You don't really look at your knees. You're just kind of looking right across here onto the mat with my eyes, not looking up and forward. Really nice cervical placement. And then you can hold this still, or you can try picking one foot off the floor. You can bring the knee in a little bit, or you can send the leg back, or just pick it up an inch off the floor and then set it down and pick the left foot up off the floor. You can do that from your chair as well. Just here getting your nice down dog, and you can pick one foot up and the other foot up. Let's do one more of these on each side. And then we are going to walk the feet toward the hands, coming either from your down dog on the floor or on the chair. Get your feet underneath you. And then start to come up to your half lift, maybe fingertips to your shin, to your thighs, to the chair, and check your cervical placement. And then engage the core, reverse swan dive, come all the way up. Keep your cervical placement, do a little tiny spinal extension. And then to mountain pose. Okay, we're going to work on pyramid. Got myself a little bit warm now. So I'm going to use the chair for pyramid. You can also use a block. So I want you to just come to a position where your feet are hip distance apart. And when I say hip distance, I mean this part of your hips, not out here part of your hips. Right here where your acetabulum and the top of your femur bone are located. And then we're just going to simply take a little baby step forward with the right foot and a little baby step back with the left foot. And if you can, keep both feet directly parallel. Sometimes the back foot turns out a little bit, and that's okay as long as it doesn't turn your pelvis. So make both feet parallel as possible. If you're feeling like you're off on your balance a little bit, you can separate your feet a little wider. Check your cervical placement. And then begin to hinge right from your hip crease without changing your cervical placement. Coming forward until we start to feel this stretch down the back of the right leg. You can support on your chair. You can support on your shin. You can support down lower onto a block. You might not even be able to reach the chair. You might be up in here, and this is feeling like an adequate stretch for you. Chair and the block works great. So it's all about cervical placement today. So I want you to focus on that primarily, and then get the benefits of your pyramid pose with your hamstring stretch. So once you are there, you have that maximum stretch that you like, you enjoy. You've got your cervical placement in place. Now we start to turn the head to the right and to the left. We'll do 3 each direction. Maybe in between each rep, you can go down a little deeper into your pose. And I want you to see the difference between the way my back looks right now and this. So I don't want you to round. I want that neutral spine. As much as you can, with any limitations you might have in your spinal alignment and in your flexibility. Okay, now you can stay here as you are. I'm going to give you an option to turn your head to the right and to lift your right hand off and turn more of your spine to the right. Hand can go to your hip, shoulder, or even reach up. This is a revolved triangle modification. And then come down. We're going to do 3 of those turns to the right. And the arm doesn't have to come up, especially if that bothers your shoulder at all. Once you get 3, recheck your cervical placement. Hands can come to your hips, and let's rise right back up. Good, all right. So now our feet are going to switch places. And you'll see that I don't have a lot of space forward and back between my feet. I mean, we certainly could do this more like this, and you'll see that in a yoga class, but then this foot is going to start to turn out and our pelvis is going to come out of alignment. So I would rather do a shorter stance so I can keep everything in position a little bit easier. Okay, so both hips are squared forward. Hands can be here at your hip crease. Check your cervical alignment. And then start to hinge forward. Now notice the space between your shoulder blades in your back and try not to let it increase. So I don't want your shoulders to collapse down. So retract and pull them back. And then you're going to find your range on this side that suits your body, and it might be a lot different from the other side. Just take your time breathing. And in terms of the front leg, you want to have it as straight as possible, but not locked out. And even a little tiny micro bend is okay. That feels better for your hamstrings and your back. You can just the littlest bit of a bend. Okay, once you have your range of motion, or what I like to call the edge, we'll start to turn the head. Before you do, let's check your cervical placement. And then turn from left to right on the axis of the neck. In fact, one of the cervical vertebrae bones is called the axis. One is called the atlas. So I can imagine that you can figure out which one is the atlas because of the, was it a sculpture or a painting of the atlas? And he was holding a big earth. So our head is the earth. The axis is holding, or the atlas is holding the head in place. Okay, so now once we're here, back to center after 3 times, we are going to rotate to the left as an option, and maybe just with the head or adding your shoulder or your upper back, or even adding the arm to raise, and then coming back down. You can even do this with your finger in the L position as you turn, just to see if you're keeping it there, because we're not just turning the head on its own, we're turning this whole torso. Good, let's do one more. Coming back to center. We can soften that front knee just a tiny bit. Place your hands to your hips. And without moving your head out of its correct placement, rise up with the strength of the posterior chain. And then step the back foot in, back to your mountain pose. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a balance. So if you feel like your balance is pretty secure today, you might not need to hold on to something, because I'm going to give you some options with that. And you can use your block as we did at the beginning of class. Otherwise, I want you to have access to a chair or a wall to do this, and don't worry about the block. So feet about hips distance apart. We're going to press the heels of the hands into the block. It's facing forward, and it's right in the center of the chest. We're going to shift our body weight into the right foot, and then take the left foot and try to bring the heel to the toe, and both of your feet are on the floor. So this is called tandem stance. Now you might have a little bit more weight in your back leg, as if you were water skiing slalom style. And then you can just stay here and press into the block, or we can turn to the right without moving the block away from the center of the chest, and we can turn to the left. Now you can also do tandem stance with a little bit more space between your feet. So instead of walking up a tightrope, you can have that foot ahead, but separate your feet a little bit more. And that's going to give you a stronger, more solid base of support. You can also do this without turning your head. So that's going to be a little easier for balance if you just look at something straight on and you rotate your spine, keeping the block into the sternum. So wherever you're at, let's rotate one more each direction. Retract your shoulder blades. And then separate your feet back about hips distance apart. You can relax any intensity on the block. Maybe move your head around, roll the shoulders. Okay, let's do the other side. So your option with the block, arms aren't in here, they're not up here, they're on a nice angle. We're pressing into the block at about a 4. Shift your body weight into your left foot and try to come into your tandem stance. Right heel to the big toe of your left foot. You can check this if you need to. And if you're just staying here, that's fine. Otherwise, we can try some rotation. Maybe 3 times each direction, choosing whether to keep your head in place or to move it. And this is interesting for me because the foot in the back is my hip that really is needing a hip replacement, like tomorrow. And boy, my balance is not nearly as good as when I had my knee replacement leg in the back. I think that hip, those muscles are weakening. I think to some degree too, I am protecting myself from pain. And those of you that know what I mean, if our body's in a little bit of pain, we're kind of in that protection mode, then we're not going to function quite as normally as our body would. Okay, great. Let's come back to center. Relax the block for a moment. Roll the shoulders. We're going to lift the knee up and down in and out of single leg stance. So you can use the block again. It's just really a nice tool. Pull the chin in so you're in that cervical placement. Shift your weight into your right foot. We'll tap the toe, the big toe of the left, engage into the block, and then just lift the knee into single leg stance, and you can tap it down. Now, if that's not working, how can we regress this a little bit? We can let the heel come to the floor, and then we can lift up onto the big toe. So this would be one first elemental way we can work on balance here. And then as we do that, we can maybe decide whether the foot can come up and back down. If that's feeling very doable, you can lift the knee up and hold. Check your cervical placement. And then set that foot down. Take any relaxing that you need to do. I feel like I need to shake out the legs a little bit. Okay, so on the other side, engage into the block if you're using that. Check your cervical placement just by tucking that chin in a little bit. Secure your shoulder blades back. Shift into the left foot. You can try the first one just by rolling up off the heel and down. So you're just unweighting the foot. Or you can lift the knee and lower. Or you can hold it up. Surprisingly, I'm managing better on this one. Must be my cervical placement. It matters. It does. All right, relax that down, and we can set the block down. Okay, we're going to spend some time on our back so we can check our cervical placement when we're laying flat on our back. So if you know you need something behind your head, I want you to have that ready as we come down onto our back, just any way for you that works good to come onto the floor. And you might need to have your yoga strap close as you come down. And then once we come down onto our back, just notice your cervical placement. So I'm starting to get a little bit rounded in my upper back, shoulders. So I do need a little something behind my head. It doesn't have to be too thick, and I still have my correct cervical placement. But if your head looks like this, you definitely need enough under your head to pick this up and have this distance be correct. So once you find that for yourself, we can hold this position, knees bent, feet flat on the floor. And we're going to press up into bridge. Now, what happens to our cervical placement when we come up into bridge? It just depends on how high we lift our hips. So I want you to keep your cervical placement. Just do a little pelvic tilt. So you're pushing your lower back down into the floor and lift your hips up a couple of inches. That should not have changed your back position or your cervical placement. Now, if you do a really high bridge with a back bend, it's going to jam your sternum into your chin. And I can't even demonstrate that for you, but I think you can imagine that if we lifted our hips way, way up, this amount would decrease. And you might be able to do that, but for today, I don't want that to happen. So I just want you to tuck, lift the hips, engage the glutes, have your cervical placement be the same, and then roll back down. Each time you roll down, come back to neutral with your pelvis, then tuck, push your low back down, lift a couple of inches, and then set your low back down, and then tilt your pelvis back to neutral. We'll do that 3 more times. Tuck and lift, lower and tilt back. 2 more. Tuck and lift, lower and tip the pelvis neutral. 1 more time. Tuck and lift, lower, and return to neutral. Now we'll take our hands straight out in front of us and bring your right knee up to tap the left or right hand. Set it back down. Take your left knee up to tap the left hand and set it back down. Keeping your spine, your pelvis neutral, your cervical placement neutral. So if you have lower back problems, you might want to stay with this one. We can make it a little bit more intense if we bring the right knee up, hold it, then bring the left knee up, and we're just going to touch the left foot down to the floor and back up for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and set the left foot down and the right foot down. Pause and rest for a moment. Really brace your abs. Bring your hands back up to reach out. Now you can do the first level by lifting your left knee and lowering, and then lifting your right knee and lowering. Or try the second level by lifting your left knee up and holding it, and you're pressing it into your hand a little bit, and then we'll lift the right leg up. 5, 4, 3, abdominal stability, 2, 1. Set your foot down and the left foot down as well, and relax. Okay, we're going to bring the right leg up and do some ankle pumps. So flex and point, flex and point. And I want you to do these fairly vigorously. So really pull the toes down, pull the toes down. 10, 9, 8, 7. Fire that shin muscle. 5, 4, 3, 2. Pull down and hold it. And then you can take your hands, grab your thigh, bring that leg in close to you a little bit more. We can use our yoga strap here underneath the bottom of the foot. And give yourself a nice hamstring stretch. For those with back issues, keep this left knee bent, the foot on the floor, or even bring it up in here. That really feels much better on the low back to do it this way. Or if you're pretty healthy through the low back, you can take the leg down. But if you feel like when you did that, your low back just rose up off the floor and you started doing a back bend, then probably that one's not the best. Let's hold here 3 more breaths. And then release. Sit that foot back down. Left leg up, and we'll vigorously pump the ankle. Pull, point, pull, point. This leg is as straight as you can get it, but if there's a little bend in the knee, that's okay. 10, 9, 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, flex and hold. We can grab here, give it a little bit of assistance, or we can use our strap. So when we're giving ourselves assistance through a stretch, that's called a passive stretch. If we're doing this by just pulling up with our leg and trying to increase it as much as we can with our muscles, that's called an active stretch. Both of them are great. So you can do either one. This leg can go down, but my hip isn't going to really like that. Right there's okay. 3 more breaths. All right, release that yoga strap if you're using it. Lower the legs down. Now we're going to do just a small amount of abdominal crunches, but what I want you to do is keep your cervical placement in position so you can check it with your hand. And then if we don't use our hands to support our head, we actually get some strengthening for our neck as well. So you can even keep your hand here. And then I just want you to lift up and down. So let's try to get 10 of those. And if your neck starts to bother you, go ahead and support the back of your head with one hand while you keep that cervical placement. 3, 4. If you think about not lifting up with your neck and lifting up with the core, then it's a little bit easier and a little less to strain on your neck. Let's get 4 more.